Hi guys, how's it going? We will start the session in about a minute's time. I'll make sure to check everything looks fine here. Yes, everything looks fine. So whoever is joining the stream, just let me know if you guys cannot hear my voice properly so that I can increase it, or I can just make sure to check everything looks fine. Right, so I'm going to give another minute's time for probably people to join, and we'll continue with the session on programming with Dart. I've renamed the session again as classes, mixins, and inheritance, primarily because in the previous session I just gave you guys a brief introduction to how classes and inheritance work with Dart, and today I'm going to continue somewhere around the same line, give a probably another brief uh, cover of what we did in the previous session, and from there on we're going to be understanding much more about classes, like how classes work with Dart. And another important type of a class, I should say, probably that's called as mixins, and what mixins are and how useful these are in any programming language, but how specifically it is useful in Dart. That's what we're going to be doing in today's session. So I'll probably start in another minute's time. Wait for probably people to join, and we can get started. All right, just let me know, guys, whoever is joining the stream. Just let me know if my voice is audible enough, so I'll know for sure if it's audible or not. If it's not audible, just let me know. I can increase my sound. All right, so let me start with the session right now. So what we're going to be doing in particular is going to be looking into the concept of classes. Not just a simple class. We're going to be primarily targeting, just look into what briefly what we did in the previous session, and from there on we're going to be looking into the concept of inheritance, and from there on about mixins. So first things first, what we did specifically in yesterday last session. So before we begin, we would just want to give a brief understanding of what we did in the previous session. So just let me know if the video is not clear enough. Yeah. All right, so hopefully this is looks like it's okay, looks like it's legible enough, so we'll get moving on. So for the first thing that I wanted to discuss in the previous session was we started understanding about classes. We just understood what classes are and how these are very useful, and we understood how the classes work. Yeah, so classes as in how perfectly useful these are. And one more important thing with classes was there's a bunch of things that you can do with classes, right? What exactly these are they basically containers where you can put a bunch of things inside it and you can have fun with it. The classes might contain, say for example, it might contain some functions here, and the next thing it might contain is it might contain a bunch of data variables that can be used together. And put together, these classes are very useful, and these are actually the backbone of any oops based programming languages. So say consider oops, and you will find that these are basically the one important and most important of any oops programming. So without classes there is no oops, and that's what we saw about in the previous session as well. Little bit sorry about the slide presentation today because I had a problem with my PowerPoint and I couldn't open it, so I just thought I would start the session with my um, with my Google Slides. So that's the thing here. So anyway, let's get moving on. What we're going to be looking into primarily is understanding about how these classes are very important. And one important thing with classes is that we understood, or we just had a basic discussion of how to create this class, how to add the variables, how to add the functions in it. We're going to be doing the same thing again today. So even if you guys had missed the previous session, that's not a problem. You can just get started from here on. So the classes, and following that, we also talked about a very important concept called as inheritance, right? Inheritance are pretty much the backbone, right? If you have a class, and if you have a class that has some functionalities, this class might have a functionality of A. Let's say it's actually targeting a class of probably students, right? So let me call this class A. This class has information about student information, like students roll number, students section, and things like that. And there's another class B that you've created that has information or variables with respect to the parent's name. For example, if you have a student A, that is student A is going who, what the details of their parents, who was the contact number, who should you contact, all of those sorts. This is going to be the class B that's going to be present here. What we're going to do is how we can, instead of actually again rewriting everything from scratch, like for example, I want to have a class, and the class should have technically a student number, right? Student name. And the student name, instead of just me going in and starting with everything again, rewriting everything from scratch, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be doing something called as inheritance. And this inheritance is basically inheriting all the properties from one class. This example is the A class with the B class to the B class. So B class is now having all information that A is also defining. And this is what in a brief way we saw in the previous session. So that's pretty much what we are going to be continuing along as well in this session. I'm going to be going through the same slides again. So if you guys missed anything, you can just carry on watching the entire stream. Alright, so moving on, we're going to be looking into something called as the classes in Dart again. And this classes in Dart is basically any object-oriented programming language. You take Java, C Sharp, Python, any Java or any object-oriented programming language will have classes present. And without classes present in some form or the other, there is no way that you can aggregate together. Say you have a function in one place, the function is to just do some action, right? Like print some data to the console, print some data to the terminal, or just do some UI actions. This is going to be the action of that action that you want to perform. And when you say action, you should always think about functions. Now, functions are basically doing some kind of an action. The second thing that you want to know about is to have some kind of a data associated with it. When you say data, let's say student number is one, name of a student is one, name of date of birth of a student is one. All of these kind of things are going to be considered as datas. And if you want to put these data as well as the function or the action together, that's when you are bringing in the concept of classes into the picture. So this is what we also saw in the previous session. And when you call, like I said, when you call a method, you invoke it on an object. So what exactly does this invoke mean, right? What does it object mean? That's what we're going to be finding out in today's session. So basically, you're going to be looking into how to create these objects basically, and this is going to be how you're going to be creating a function. Like you're going to be creating an object of a class, and from there on, you're going to be instantiating the object of the class onto we basically going to be accessing all the data information that you want. Like if you want to access, say, the action, you're just going to say this class has this action, so just go here and access that. And if you want to say you want to specifically access some data, you will say this class has this specific data, so just go inside and access that. So that's what you're going to be doing with help of classes. So I'm just going to be starting to write some code now. So if you guys have any questions, just drop them out so we will know for sure if there are any doubts here. So I'm just going to be writing all my code in something called as dartpad.dev, and hopefully you guys also do that. I've talked about in detail in a lot of my previous streams as well. So what exactly this dartpad does is that it's going to give you guys an online ID to practice your code. So in the starting things that you need to know is that you also obviously need to have a browser installed. It could be any browser. Dartpad.dev is just like an online ID that you can practice things on. So let's start writing some code. The first thing that you want to do obviously is to have a void main. This is something that we saw in the first session with respect to the concept of Dart programming. So void main is basically the entry point into the program. You have this some form of void main in any kind of a programming language. If you take the example of Python, you have the main block being created, If you take the example of Java again has this concept of void main, which means that void or just main alone, which means that you're going to be creating an entry point, and this main function is going to be giving you the access inside it. So just going to start writing some things here. I'm just going to like just create my void main and just say print, this is the start of the program, or this is the start, right? We already seen that. And whatever I'm typing now is basically the syntax for creating classes, so just follow that along. The second thing I'm going to do is just say print, this is the end, and this is end is going to be basically for just marking the end of the program, right? So that's what these are two important print statements that you have, and we're going to be following along from here on. So the next thing we're going to be doing is to start introducing the first variable into the picture. So we're going to have a variable outside the void main function or the main function, where I'm going to just define a variable called as name. I'm just going to say name is going to be, my name is Bharat, so I'll just say Bharat and finish it off right here. And what I'm trying to do here is to just say print name. So just say how this entire void main works. So all you need to do is just type these lines of code and just go to your right and just run this install or run this code, and you will see to your right that whatever is inside your main function will only get executed. If you put some print functions here, it will not even understand that there is a print that is required. So just say this is outside. If you do something like this, nothing will happen, because whatever is, it also throw an error saying that print cannot be outside. So this is also an important one. So you always can do print statements and things like that only inside a function. So this is the basic things that you have seen. Next step we're going to do is to create our first class. The class syntax is very simple. Just use the keyword class, which is CLASS, and followed by that give it a name. When I say give it a name, you need to always adhere to the Dart syntax guidelines, meaning that you need to adhere to the style guide, which says that you can only write names in the form of upper camel case. So upper camel cases are nothing but something like this. So upper camel case. So what does this upper camel case mean? It means that the first letter of every word of the class name should be in capital letters. So this is the upper camel case format. So next step we're going to do is to start writing or giving it a simple name. So I'll just give it a student registration and open and close the flower brackets. So successfully we have created our first class. So this is how you denote a class name. This is how you denote a class, and whatever is inside this class, right? You can put anything inside this class. You can put a variable, you can put another class inside, you can put a function, you can put anything that you want inside this class. That's the power of a class. So just as the name suggests, it's just trying to put everything under one class of things together, so that way it is easy for us to communicate or understand when you're trying to use it across your function. So we start writing our first we start defining our first variable inside a class. And when I say variable, I'm going to be doing something similar to this. So I'll just say, for example, variable name again inside. You should also understand that everything inside a class, as far as Dart is concerned, you cannot leave it as null. You should always give it some kind of a default value. So for example, I'll just if you just do something like this, and if you just leave it, it will just say that it cannot be null. You need to always give it some value. So what I'm going to do is just going to say var is equal to default, meaning that I'm just going to leave this variable default. If nothing is created, nobody is trying to access this, or nobody is trying to change the value of this, it will remain as default forever. The next thing I want to do is just create a registration number. I'll just call this registration number, and I just give it as 0 because another default value. So two things are done. We have a variable name, which is going to be the name of the student. It's very easily understood, right? So when you say student class student registration has two variables, name and the number. I don't even have to name it as registration number. I'll just say number. This means that the student's name is what this is going to mean. Similarly, the student registration has a variable called as number. It could be meaning the number or the registration number of the student. So that's how you are going to be naming your variables inside a class as well. So this is the entirety of defining variables inside. And the next step we're going to be looking into is going to be the concept of creating functions inside the classes. So how does a function play an important role? That's what we're going to be finding out. Alright, so let's move on. So what we're going to do is to just define a function inside. The function definition inside a class is pretty straightforward again. So you all know that in order to define a function, you need to give it a name followed by an open close bracket which denotes the signature of the signature of the function, meaning that it denotes the arguments that it can take. All of this was already covered in the previous streams, so make sure to check all that out. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is to create a simple function. So I'll just say simple function. Inside the simple function, I'm going to be defining my first function. I'm just going to say I need to have like probably I'll just say print. The function name is going to be print data. This is going to be the print data function. So just open and close brackets, open and close the flower brackets, and successfully defined a print data as my first function. So all I can do is just go inside and I can just print this is inside the class function. So I'm just going to print this so we can see how this is very useful. Next thing we're going to do is to now try to print the name of the student followed by print the student registration number. So this is the three things that we are going to be doing. So when you say this is inside the class function and this is the name, this is the number, what we are trying to do, what board? Hi sir, how's it going? And what board do you mean? If you tell me what board, I can actually probably help you. If you mean this one, I've already started with this, so I already explained the concept before jumping into the code. So that's what I'm trying to do right now. So if you mean board as in do this, yeah, I actually already defined or given a basic understanding of how to create a class in Dart, and only then started writing code here. I'm not directly jumping into writing code. So just stick around for another minute. I'll again start with and explaining what we have written here in a separate slide. So what we're going to do right now is to just try to print all the information, right? That's what this function is going to be doing it for us. So when I say this is inside the class function, how do we now call this function? Right now, if you say calling or invoking a function, so far what you have seen is just call it, right, like something like this. So print is basically a simple function, and you pass some data inside it, you'll just print it to the console. That's how functions are created. So far what you've done is just call the print function, and it's just printing some things on the UI. Similarly, if you want to call this function right here, you cannot directly say print data, and it will not be able to understand what print data. It will think like what exactly is this guy talking about. So what we need to do is create something called as objects in classes. So that's what we're going to be finding out right now. So let's just get started with the basic introduction of what is really happening so that you guys don't get really confused. So what I have done so far is just create our first classes. And when I say first class, what I exactly mean is define the variables for that class, followed by that also defining something called as the variables and the function. So variable is here. This is going to be the variable for me, and I'm also going to be having the function right here. So the function could be doing some kind of an action. It could be something related to the variables inside the class only. So since we already know a class is a combination or a collection of a variable and a function, this is actually going to be as simple as this. This class and the function put together is going to act as a class. So what is going to happen is from here on, it's as simple as saying this class A is going to be having few variables, let's say student number, and then it's going to have variables like student registration number, all of that sort. And it's also going to have few functions like print some data, check if this data is available in the database, or check if this data is actually applicable for us. And all of these informations are going to be part of the functions here as well. So now how do you call these functions? And when I say call these functions, what I'm trying to say is basically what these classes do is create or produce the instance of those classes. So if you have, for example, student number A, student number as 1, then you want to have a record of another student whose student number is now 2. So what you're exactly doing is creating multiple instances of the same class but with different data. So there's one data here, but you're creating multiple instances of the same class but with different data. So these are called as instances, or also called as objects of that class. So this class might have the first with starting with the student number. It could be student number 1. It could then have a student number as 2 here. It could have student number as 3, and so on and so forth. And it could have combination of data as well. So student number 1 will have name as Bharat and something like this. And it also could be meaning that for the student number 2, the name could be Azhar is here, so I will say Azhar, and things like this. So that's how this is going to be defined. So what exactly we're doing is having the same class everywhere here. That is the same class. It is defining what should be given, and using that information we are creating a combination of data for different instances. And when I say different instances, the computer terms for that is called as the programming term is called as the object of that. So each object represents one form of data. So one combination of data. It could be 1 bara, 2 bara, 3 bara, something like that. So if one variable is given, hi Sumit, how's it going? Good evening as well. So that's pretty much what we are trying to do here. So basically creating multiple instances of the classes, and this multiple instances is at the end of the day giving us the objects. And what we're going to do now, once you have the objects of it created, meaning that once you have the instance of it created, you can then have like a direct mechanism or direct hook into the class to call this function. You can call a variable from here. Only after you create an instance, you get access to all of these things. So technically the term for this is going to be objects. So only if you have an object of a class created, you can go in and access everything that is inside that class. For example, it could be basically the variable names that you have created. It could be the functions that you have created inside the class. It could also be another class that you have defined inside the class as well. So all of these things can be done. So how do you exactly define an object for a class? That's what we're going to be finding out in this session. So the first thing we have done is we just created a simple student registration class. That is done. And in this step, next step that we're going to do is just say this is the start, and we just printed that. The next thing we're going to do is create an object of it. Now creating objects are very simple. First thing you need to do is define it just like a variable, because objects again are variables, right? This could be object of a student registration. There could be another object of student information. There could be another class called as something completely totally unrelated, like flower names. That could be the class name, and you could have an object for that as well. So that's what we can try to create or instantiate. First thing you're going to do is just create normal variable just like we usually do. Just say where we'll just call it a student object 1, and what you need to do is just call the student object just like this. Say student registration of. And when you say this, when you just call it just normally like a function name, you are technically doing the instantiations. It says that the value of the local variable student object 1 isn't used anywhere. So what next I'm going to do is go inside and just going to try to call the function that we have called here. So once you have the object created, then you have access to the variables inside and the functions inside. That's what I told, right? So you need to just now try to call this print data easily. So all you need to do is just use this notation. Just say student object 1. So first we call the object name that we have already created, followed by that put a full stop, and then you can call all the methods inside it. So I'll just say print data. So it's obviously trying to print it. So close this up with a semicolon, and that's what we have done so far. Amazing, right? So we have instantiated an object, instantiated a class, and using that object or the variable, we have now called the method inside it. So just go up and try to run this code, and we'll see how this turns out to be. Awesome, right? So it's actually trying to print all this information like this is inside the class function. That's what we have defined right here, and followed by that it's trying to print the name and the number that is from here. So name and the number. Let's say you're giving something else here, it will just print. Now this is actually going to be a static object, meaning that all the data inside this is always going to have the name and number as default and 0. That's not going to change. But what if you want to change the value? Like how do you propose a mechanism for the user, whoever is creating an object, to pass data inside this class? So he wants to, first person would want to have the name as Bharat, the second person might want to have Sumit, third person might want to have the name as Azhar, and things like that. How do you propose we do that? In order to do that, there is another important topic which is called as constructors, and we understood about in depth about constructors in the previous session. So I'll just give you like a basic understanding of constructors, and we'll just move on to the concept of inheritance and the concept of mixins, because we are short pressed for time, obviously. Alright, so I'm going to be talking about constructors, and one of the important use of a constructor is to help with passing of data inside the class. So I just showed here that inside this place, inside this function, inside this class, sorry, there is no way to change the value of this right now. At this point of time, there is no way to change the value of this. But what if I want to change the value? In order to do that, I can pass in some data or have like a hook mechanism that can collect the data and then change the value of my variables, and that is called as constructor. So the as I've written here is ways to pass data inside a class that provide the mechanism to send data in and out. So declaring a constructor is just the most simplest thing that you can do. Declare a constructor with the help of this technique. Then how do you spot a constructor? First of all, when you say constructor, it is just to construct the object of the class. So it's giving us the mechanisms to do that. So that's easily possible by just using the same class name as the function name inside the class. So when you say student registration is the class name, just copy this up and just create another function with help of the same class name, and that's pretty much it. We have successfully created a constructor, and that's the most simplest thing that you can do. This is the constructor. So the compiler or the Dart compiler is smart enough to understand what a constructor is and when a constructor is created, and from here on you can easily now set the value of this, set the value of this by just allowing a variable to be passed in. So first variable I'm going to be doing is just call it as name again, and I have another variable as int number. So these are two variables that I'm going to be taking inside my constructor method, and then now I'm going to be setting the value of these two things. Now this variable name here is just the temporary variable name, so I can even have it as name from outside and number from outside, right? So two variable names are present now. The next thing I'm going to do now is to set the value of these two variables. So this is going to be from outside and this is going to be from inside. When I say inside the class, I will just directly call it by calling or invoking the object this dot name. So again, if you are clearly understanding the flow of objects, you will very well know at this point of time when I say this dot, I'm talking about the current classes variables. So I can still say this dot print data, I can say this dot whatever is that is inside the class. If you want to invoke it, right, just use this dot that value. So this dot name is now is equal to name from outside. Followed by that we have this dot number is equal to number from outside. So you have these two variables now set. That's pretty much the entirety of constructors. It's just allowing some data to come inside, and we've successfully done that. And now if you go here down, it just throws an error saying that two positional arguments are expected for this class. So as soon as you define your constructor, that means that wherever you're creating an object, it's going to be applicable almost instantly to pass some information inside it. By default, you need to pass some information. So first thing I'm going to do is just pass the information for the name. So I'll just pass the information as Sumit is here, so say Sumit, and I'll have another student number probably, right? So student number is going to be probably 22. So this is going to be the first object that I've created. Now I'm going to be creating another object, and this object is going to be having the same format. So say student object 2. I'm just going to say student registration. I'll just pass the student registration. I'm just going to be passing the value as my name Bharat and my registration number. Dart streams have actually scheduled a session for Dart streams for tomorrow, where you're going to be discussing in depth about asynchronous programming in Dart that is available. So if you are interested, you can watch that stream. So I'm just going to be discussing about in depth about asynchronous programming, and there's also another stream following day after tomorrow where you're going to be talking about futures and streams and how it is very new to Dart, and I'll just explain the entirety of it, like full on dive deep we will do on that session. For now, I'm just going to be continuing with another important topic called mixins in this session. So why mixins are used and why it is very important. So I'm just going to be creating an object here for the finally. So Bharat, and just pass like student registration number. I'll just call it 66, something like this. So I've called another student object 2, just I've created, and what I'm going to do now is to just now try to use this object. So I'll just say student object 2 dot print data. Just call this function, just the full finish the function off, and we'll try to run this code, right? So in run this code, you'll find that whatever object that was created is now actually replacing the variables that you have right here. So name is there, number is there. Whatever you pass from outside, right, that is now acting as the instance of that object or instance of that class, and is setting that name to this basically to this value. So that's pretty much how you create your classes, and that's how you pretty much created constructors as well. So I'm just going to be moving on to the next topic. We'll just give me another minute's time to probably take a breather. And what you're going to do now is to, like, if you have guys have any questions, you can drop them in the rights in the comment the chat stream. So I already talked about model classes in the previous stream. I think you asked the same question there also, and I explained it to you, like why a model class is used. Yeah, I'm just going to be waiting here for another question, like some other questions that you guys have, and once you guys do that, I'll probably continue on with the concept of inheritance, like just a basic understanding of inheritance, and it's just going to be continuing on with concept of mixins in Dart. So the whole idea for this is for talking about inheritance and the mixins. So that's what we're going to be doing. So just let me know if you guys have any questions. I'll be back in about a minute's time. So that's what we're going to be finding out. All right, so let's get moving on. We're going to be talking about inheritance, like I said, and just a brief understanding of inheritance is what we're going to be trying to do here. So when I say brief introduction or brief understanding of inheritance, what I'm trying to say is that what exactly do these inheritances do, and how do you implement that in that. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. Told the concept, can you say it as named constructors? So named constructors are like I think I talked about named constructor in the previous session, that's why I didn't want to cover it here. Since we're doing just like a brief walkthrough, named constructors are nothing but a way of creating or giving it another name. You can already have it as you already have something called as a student registration, it's the class name right here. So what you can do as a name constructor, so basic understanding of constructor, like I said, is to just allow data to be taken inside a class. If you want to give it a name, right, you can still do that. All you need to do is just say something like this, named constructor, and just call it a student registration. Just use the same name as the class name, and you just additionally pass a name to this. So just say student registration dot probably construct, something like this is going to be my function name, and just define it just normal, like a normal function, and I'll just have variables inside it just like this, where name and int number and things like that, and I'll just continue passing on my data right there. So if the user wants to, it'll understand. Let's say that you want to have a different constructor present, instead of just allowing a name, you want to now allow probably instead of like, let's say that you want to initialize some other variables. So I have another variable like this right here. I'll just call this variable as string. I'll call it as the DOB, and this is for now it's going to be 0 1 0 1 1999. This is going to be my variable. What I'm going to do now is, just instead of using this constructor, I want to have another constructor just to initialize my date of birth. It could be, there could be functions like that also. So I'll just construct the data, or just allow the date of birth alone to be taken inside my constructor. I'll just say this dot dob is equal to dob, right? This is going to be the function of my constructor. So nothing else is getting affected here. But if somebody wants to create another new constructor, all they need to do is just call student registration dot that the constructor name, and they can now be able to create another object with a specific constructor functions that you have created. So basically what you're doing is naming the constructor in the form of just in order to create a new form of an object without affecting whatever is already present. So this is already present. Let's say you have 1000 lines of code. This constructor is already used everywhere. Now you want to make some changes where you want to allow few changes to the constructor. You want to have another mechanism to take some other data inside. Instead of touching this, you can just create a named constructor here and allow the data to be passed inside through this name constructor and create your own objects without having to affect whatever is already present. So that's the whole idea behind name constructor. Nothing complex about this, and this is also not required in most places. And I would highly recommend to not do create or use name constructors. For one important reason why I'm saying that is, when it, this is something that you learn as part of your programming, and when you try to build bigger projects, what you try to avoid is to make a lot of changes to a class that is already built. So if there is already a class that is already built, you don't want to keep on putting some data inside it. You don't want to keep on extending it. And when you try to do that, you tend to break the product, you try to break the service, and it becomes a huge headache. So what you need to try to avoid is to probably not do that. So that's what something you try to practice when you're building bigger projects. So name constructor, I'm not a big fan of that, but still it's a good concept when it comes to Dart, which is actually new to Dart as well. So that's why I didn't cover this part. So let me move to inheritance in a brief understanding of inheritance, and followed by that I'll just give you guys an understanding of mixins as well, because like I said, mixins are the most important part for us for this session. So in the concept of inheritance, like I said in the start of this stream, the whole idea behind inheritance is to inherit some data from one point to another. So let's say there is one class right here, very bad at drawing things. So there's one class right here, and I have another class right here. So this class is named A, and this class is named B, right? There's a class A and class B, and the class A now has, like we already know, if we say a class, the class can have variables, the class can have functions, the class can have another class inside it. So the class A now has three important variables, like say username, password, and probably some information like user's data file. These are the three important informations that the class A has. Now you want to create another class B, and this class should all actually have information as to last login time, and also something like last known or last logged out time, and things like that. You also want to additionally have the same information that was already present in A as well, like username, password, and the probably the date of birth. And these three informations you want to be inside B, and on top of that you want to have your other additional information. So that's going to be the mechanism, that's the product that you're trying to build. And when that is a use case, what you try to do is you're trying to probably invoke or make use of the concept of inheritance, where inheritance says that you inherit all the product or all the informations that are going to be present inside A and into B. And then they say inside A and into B, what I'm saying is what all the variables that are present inside A, all the functions that are present inside A, that is going to be taken from the class A and it's going to be given to class B. You can have that mechanism, and that is possible in Dart. And just wanted to try to underline one important word here, which is called as the single inheritance. The single inheritance is going to be playing a very, very important role. I don't know why I do this bad. I'll call it from here. Just remove this. I got really excited and okay. So this word single inheritance is like the most important word that you need to underline when it comes to Dart. This important word single inheritance means that a class A or a class B can only inherit another class. You can only inherit one single class. It cannot inherit multiple different classes. That is possible in few other languages like C# and you have classes that possible Java as well. But when it comes to Dart, you cannot do that. The main reason why you cannot do that is because it introduces a lot of different problems, which I'll talk about when it comes to Mixins. But in the class B, the single inheritance says that you can only inherit one single class, and that is it. You cannot do anything more than that. It restricts inheriting multiple classes, and that is probably why you'll find that the inheritance in Dart is pretty straightforward. So just go and start understanding or giving you guys a brief understanding of how inheritance works. So the first thing you need to do is the like I've mentioned, you use the extends keyword to denote that you're trying to inherit something. Just use the extends keyword, and you say extends, that means that it's extending from another class, or extending all the information from another class. So in this example, B is trying to extend information from A. So that's how you try to define inheritance. So just go here. I'm just going to define a basic simple thing here. I just called a class called as a class. We'll have like university ranking, right? Something like this. This is going to be the class name, university ranking, and you want to just extend the class student registration from it, because student registration, obviously all the information from the student registration you definitely need. Student registration, yeah. So you want to obviously have information as to the user, student's name, student's registration number, and student's date of birth. These are three important things that you definitely need. So what you will just say is to university ranking, and it extend the student registration, and just open and close flower package. That's pretty much it. You're successfully done inheriting the student registration. So as soon as you do this inheritance, right, it throws an error. It says that the university ranking doesn't have a zero argument constructor. So that means that it has one constructor right here, and this constructor has two information, like the name from outside, and there's another variable called as number from outside. So if you have defined a constructor in the base class, so this is going to be the base class, because you don't find any extents here. So whenever you find a base class, that means that you do not have any kind of an extends keyword. It's not extending any information from anywhere. So this is base class as a constructor that is defined right here. So if that is having a constructor that is defined right here, you cannot leave the parent or the child class, whichever is trying to extend information from, just like that. You cannot do that. So you definitely need to invoke that constructor again. That is possible by just creating another constructor right here. Just say university ranking, and you pass information as to name and int number, and just use the colon, call this super, and you just pass the name and number. So basically this is called as the super keyword, and this super keyword is also something that you guys asked me in the previous session. I did not give the information in the previous session primarily because I wanted to continue that along with the concept of mixins. And what this simple one single line is actually trying to say, create a constructor first of all for university ranking. So when the constructor is now created, whoever is trying to create an object of university ranking will try to definitely pass two information. The first information they'll try to pass is the name, and the second information they'll try to pass is the number. So once the name and the number is passed, just pass it along to your super, or pass it along to your parent. So that's what is trying to do upward movement. So in the first session, I told that the concept of Dart or any programming language is a top-down approach. Everything starts from the top and goes to the bottom. The super does is that it is trying to push the data above it, meaning that you need to read above it. So when I say super, you need to understand that I'm trying to pass information to the super class. In this example, it's a student registration. So when I say super off, it will automatically go and invoke the constructor that is defined in the super class. In this example, it's a student registration. So that's the pretty much the entirety of it. So you successfully created a class called as university ranking, and you've inherited all the variables and functions from the student registration class as well, and also now created a constructor inside it, and that is actually now also invoking the super of things, supers constructor, which is actually this student registrations constructor. So this is the flow of inheritance. We already seen this in the previous session. I'm just trying to give a brief overview of this. If you guys still have any doubts, you can just drop it in this in the comment section below this video, so that I can type the comments out, I can solve your queries, and that's pretty much it. So how do you create? When you create an object of this, you will just do the same steps again. So I'll just go here, I'll just say new object, right? All right, I'll just say new object. I'll now create a variable for this, which is variable, probably I'll just call it as variable univ ranking 1. I'll just now create an object which is university ranking of. I just need to pass the same information as this again here. So this is a university ranking of Bharat with the student registration number 66. So when I say this, it is automatically creating the object of it. So I can just now play around with it. I can just say print, probably I can say university, no, univ ranking, right? Ranking 1 dot, I can have access to all the information. As you can see here, it is having access to the name, number, print data, and DOB as well. So that's the power of inheritance. You're inheriting not only the information, but also the functions that are defined in the base class. So just say call the print data. No, print data will not print anything. So just call the, for example, probably I just try to call the name of it. So just say print name, and I'm pretty much done here. So whatever all the things that are passing here, I'm able to pass it right here. We need to pass two parameters. Not all the time you need to pass two parameters. What you're trying to do here is to just satisfy the constructor that is present in the base class. So this is the base class, right? This is going to be having all the information. You're trying to derive information from here to your child class, or that is what you're trying to inherit from. So what you need to do is to obviously try to satisfy that, and that satisfaction is coming from the super keyword. When you use a super keyword, it is trying to send information upward, and when you set information upward, you need to have two information. One is the name and the number. That is what we have already created a constructor for. So in order to do that, you're trying to get two information, two data from the user. So you need to read it from right to left in this one. First things first, you try to satisfy your super, which is your base class, and the base class is requiring two information. One is the name and the number. So you just need to pass the name and the number here. But how do you get this name and the number from? Where do you get it from? You can only get it by allowing a constructor for the university ranking, which is the class that you're trying to inherit. So when you say university ranking, you just create a simple constructor here, and you're just allowing two variables to be passed. One is the name and the next is the number. So now you have access to the name as well as the number, and when you just say colon here, that is basically to say just take the name and the number from the left and just pass it to the right, and that is what is happening here. So that's how you are trying to create an object for your child class as well. So that's pretty much what is happening. So that's what you're trying to do here. Again, inside the main function, you're trying to again create the object of university ranking. Now if you don't have an object of university ranking, right, let's say that you are not allowing a constructor at all to be present, it will just throw an error saying that it will keep on throwing error. If you see, let me just do something like this, print data. Now it's throwing an error. So the compiler is now throwing an error saying that the super class student registration doesn't have zero argument constructor, which means that you need to satisfy the constructor, and in order to satisfy the constructor, this is the mechanism. So you accept two variables just like you normally do, and accept it just like a base class, and then pass it on to the super class. Now let's say that you have another variable inside present here. you have another variable like the pass percentage, right? So I'll just say pass percentage. That is going to be basically, pass percentage is going to be a float value. So I'll just say by default it's going to be 0, 0.0. It's going to be considering it as 0, 0.0. And when you do this, what happens is that, let's say you want to set values for the pass percentage also. That's when you'll actually try to get another variable inside. Two variables to satisfy your super, one variable to satisfy your own class variable itself. So that's pretty much how this entire thing works. Hopefully it will clear your doubt. So just do not worry about anything of that sort. Just first try to satisfy your super class, in this example the student registration class, and then automatically everything else will satisfy. So that's pretty much how the concept of inheritance works. So when I say inheritance, like I said, it's just a single inheritance. One class can inherit only another one, and this can keep on going as well. So this is not like stuck to just one level alone. You can keep on going, like this class B can then be inherited by another class called as C, and this can keep on going. So just okay, yeah, this class B can then be inherited by another class called as class C. Just create another class. So the class C can also inherit it. So what this class C will now have is information of class A, class B, as well as the information that class C also defines by itself. So this is allowed. This is called as single inheritance, one below the other. That is allowed, totally fine, and there is no problems with it. But the concept of multiple inheritance, let's say that I want to have a class B, and this class B should also not only inherit the class A's information, but also I wanted to inherit something else like this. I wanted to inherit another class called as class A1, something like this. One important example that people usually give for explaining the concept of multi-level inheritance is basically the birds, right? If you say birds, right, there's water bird, there's land bird, and there's also, let's say, that marshland birds and multiple type of birds. And there's also, let's now consider animals, right? Animals have legs, animals have noses, animals have eyes, and things like that. So if you want to categorize what are the things that are going to come inside under a bird, what are the things that are going to come under an animal, you have common variables like legs, eyes, and nose, and things like that. But if you want to define a bird separately, you will say that it has wings, right? So what your class should have is all the information like your nose, face, all those things from one class, and birds will have additionally the wings from another class. So basically that's what you're trying to do here. When you try to define a class that not only takes the data from one class but from multiple classes here, this is not allowed in Dart. This is primarily not allowed in Dart because it produces a lot of problems, especially in Java and C Sharp. Not just that alone, whatever programming languages that allow multi-level inheritance or multiple inheritance will have a problem called diamond problem. I'll talk about the diamond problem now. So just think of this: when you have multiple classes that are being extended by one class, this is not allowed in Dart. So just have to make sure to know that specifically. Right, so let's go to the one down to the mixins. Now these mixins are the solutions to multiple inheritance. So when you say multiple inheritance, like I said, again here you have multiple classes being used or tried to be used by one specific class. Class C is here, and this class C can only inherit one class, right? It can only inherit one class. This is going to be class A from now, right? Pretty much cool. I have A here and I have C here, and that's pretty much what is allowed. But what I want to do is, with the help of the mixins, I can now successfully have another. I'm trying to basically implement a mechanism to allow multiple inheritance. So I just say mix this in. So just inherit one class, but mix this in with another kind of a class. So mixins are not exactly classes, but these are type of special classes where they don't allow variables and all to be present. They only allow few functions to be present, and you cannot directly instantiate a mixin. The primary focus of a mixin is to be mixed in with inheritance. So that's the difference behind inheritance and mixins right here. So let me draw this example here. So think of these boxes as classes. So mixins are basically, think of them as circles. The whole use of a mixin is to just act as a level of inheritance, just to support inheritance. Just these are going to be used. You cannot actually inherit, or you cannot actually instantiate a mixin. You can only use it for the concept of inheritance. So you can only be used along with another class. You cannot directly use a mixin separately. So that's the whole idea behind mixins in specific to Dart. So I said that I've actually put it right here. Yeah, as I've said, these are necessarily used to restrict the diamond problem that comes up in OOPS. This is a very famous problem that was very long ago found out when Java was having this issue. Java was having the issue of diamond problem, where let's say there is a class A that is present here. I'll open up probably this one here. There's a class A present, and this class A is trying to inherit some information from somewhere here. It's trying to inherit some information from basically this point. So it's saying from here you take one class, and it was allowing multiple inheritance to be allowed. So one from here, and is also allowing one from here. And sometime down the road you're writing a very huge program. What happens is that sometime down the road there is another class that you're trying to create here, and this class is now trying to inherit information from this class. There's one class here, and let me create one class here. There's one class here that is trying to inherit from, and additionally it is trying to inherit from another class that is present here, right? What you're trying to do here is you're basically stuck in between creating an object for this. If you want to create an object for this one, you need access to this class and this class, and this class is now inheriting this class, which is actually another class. So basically you're stuck in kind of a cycle where you're stuck in this diamond formation, where multiple classes are waiting for instances of another classes. And this is very huge problem that you cannot debug at all until you break down your entire program and you rewrite it from scratch. It is kind of a huge problem. So most of the functions or most of the services that are being written right now are trying to eradicate or not get into this diamond problem. That is pretty much what is this whole thing about. So multiple inheritance gives rise to diamond problem, and diamond problem you can think of it this way: class A, which is me, I'm trying to wait for another class B, which is trying to wait for another class C, and C is again waiting for A. So basically you're stuck in this kind of a cycle or this loop that you never solve unless you break down a class and you cut the ties with another class. So this is a huge problem when it comes to multiple inheritance, and that is pretty much being solved by the use of mixins, where the whole idea of mixin is to not instantiate. You cannot inherit a mixin, you can only use it with another class which is going to be getting inherited. So I'll just give you guys a code example right now, and probably in the next session I'll try to explain it to you guys in depth as to how you can pretty much use mixins in multiple ways. So go to your dartpad again here. You already have a class called as university ranking, and you have student registration is going to be the base class. So successfully what you've done is you've inherited a class which is going to be the student registration. Now I want to have another use case where I want to get information as to, let's say I want to get information as to the students I don't know, username, something like that. Like let's say I want to get the student's username, but I don't want it to be a class. So I just use the keyword called as mixin, and if you use the keyword mixin, that means that you are trying to create a mixin which can only be mixed in with other classes. So right, so let's go and start defining the first mixin. Mixin is going to be called as student user information. This is going to be student mixin information. I just open close brackets here. I just now defined all the parameters that I need to do. So I just create my first function. I just call this void user information print. So close brackets, I just print the information as this is inside the mixin. I'm trying to print the function here. Finish it off here. So we're basically saying just create an empty function which is going to be user information, just print something inside it, and it's going to be a mixin. So you can think of it this way: if you have a mixin, you cannot instantiate it, you cannot create an object of it. When I say object of it, you cannot do this. This is definitely not possible. You can only use it to be along with another class, basically trying to mimic a multiple inheritance but without having to get into the problem of this diamond problem or this diamond loop problem. So now you want to have this information. Let's say that you want to have this function inside your class. All you do is use the next keyword, which is called as with. When you say with means that you need to use a mixin only. Extends is for inheritance, with is for using mixins. So mixin here is going to be student user information. Pretty much done. So all you need to do is just say class name, extends of inheritance, with a student registration or student information, which is basically the mix in. So now let's see if this university ranking is having access to this function. That's what we're trying to do. So just go here. We already have a variable for university ranking down below. Just put an enter and let's try to see if this works pretty fine. All right, so I'm going to see is I'm just going to say univ ranking 1 dot. As soon as I say dot, you find that it's trying to give you access to the mixin function, the mixin function that you defined. So I'm just going to try to call this up and I'll just finish it with a full stop of semicolon. So this is basically the information that was present inside our mixin, right? And that's what this is actually giving us access to. So you just say user information print and you'll just go here and try to print this function. Voila, so we have successfully also gained access to another class that is not a actual class but kind of a type of a class that is specifically used for the concept of or implementing the concept of multiple inheritance. So that's pretty much what I had planned for you guys in this session. So just open for questions for another probably 2 to 3 minutes of time. If you guys have any questions, you can ask that. I do know that you can do a lot of things with mixins, which I'll cover in the next session. You can do restricted mixins, you can do mixins that will be used only when a specific inheritance is happening. All of those things can be possible with mixins, and it's actually something derived from Python. Python does it almost flawlessly, where it tries to use mixins in a lot of places. So I'll try to explain all of that in the next session. So if you guys have any questions, just drop them right now. I'll be very happy to answer that. All right, looks like pretty much done here. If you guys have any questions, you know what to do. Drop them down in the comment section below. So I'll definitely be checking out all my videos and how it is performing. And if you guys have any questions, I try to answer them as much as possible. And if you guys are interested, check me out on my my YouTube channel as well. You can just check me out there, and it's called as Coder Monk. It's actually the YouTube channel is called as Coder Monk, and you can pretty much check me out right there. So YouTube channel is Coder Monk, and you can just check me out. Coder. Okay, I need to pretty much definitely fix this this thing in the next session. The next live is tomorrow. Actually, I've planned it for tomorrow around 8 o'clock Indian time, so you can check me out that time. So this is going to be the YouTube channel. Check me out there, and also check me out on the Unacademy platform. If you guys were interested, Unacademy, lot of free classes are running live almost at this point of time. A lot of parallel live free classes are running. So if you guys want to activate or just get access to all these live classes, you need to use my activation code, which is again Coder Monk. And when you use Coder Monk, you get access to all the free classes, and you can just watch them to your own interest, however long you want. So check me out there, and I'll be happy to answer all your questions on my Instagram, LinkedIn. Connect with me, and I'll be very happy to answer all of your questions there as well. So I'll see you guys in the next session. Tomorrow is going to be the next session. We're going to be continuing from Dart. I'll pretty much follow up on all the things that we did today and continue with a new topic tomorrow. I'll see you guys then. Until then, it's Bharat. Peace out. Have a super awesome day.